Welcome, dear travellers. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Can you imagine holding a stone in your hand that would one day change the fate of the entire human race? That's how our story begins, long before cities, before writing, before even humans as we know them. But before we travel back millions of years, take a moment to get comfortable. Pillows, blankets, and a deep breath. And tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? I love seeing people from every corner of the globe joining in. Now, close your eyes if you like, and let's step into the long night of the Stone Age. The sun hasn't risen yet. Air cool and damp, the ground rough under your bare feet. You crouch beside a watering hole in East Africa, while nervous gazelles sip on the far bank. Your mouth is dry, but instinct says wait. The grass whispers. Somewhere out there, a hunter is already awake. Paws soft, breath controlled, eyes fixed on something that isn't you, at least not yet. A ripple passes across the surface of the pool, a tremor in the morning chorus of insects, and then dust erupts. A saber-toothed cat explodes from the tall grass, muscles like coiled rope, jaws yawning around ivory knives. The herd breaks in a panic of hooves and breath. When the predator drags its prize away, scraps of meat remain on the ground, bright against the dust, a promise small and risky and impossible to ignore. Hunger has a voice. It's a low call behind your ribs, steady and persuasive. You shift closer with your little band, bodies kept small, shoulders angled as if an apology could make you invisible. Something glints in your companion's hands, a fist-sized stone with a fresh, unnatural edge. A moment ago it was just a rock, now it is a tool. You watch the trick. Stone against stone, the strike not hard but precise. Angle, twist, release. A flake leaps free and suddenly there's a line as sharp as a thorn. You copy the motion, strike, turn, strike again. The first blow stings your palm. The second skitters and draws a chalky scar across the core. On the fourth, a bright shard pops into your hand so thin it sings. You test the edge with your thumb and jerk back at the slice. Blood wells, then stops when you press the cut to your lips. New caution settles into your fingers. You're learning to be careful with inventions. The meat is stringy and dusted with grit. You shave a strip from the hide scraps left behind and press it to your tongue. Flavor rushes in. Iron, fat, the wild heat of an animal that was alive only minutes ago. Your jaw works with purpose. The ache in your belly eases, then shifts into a deeper warmth that travels to your shoulders, your legs, the corners of your eyes. You swallow and your breathing steadies. Around you, others scrape and saw with their own fresh edges. Circular motions to lift sinew, prying motions to open seams, little strokes where the flesh clings to skin. Someone cracks a long bone with a well-aimed stone and tips it so pale, marrow glistens at the mouth. A child watches with huge, unblinking eyes, then leans in for the smallest taste, grimaces, and smiles anyway. New food, new rules, new skills. The body keeps track. A vulture drops from a high circle and lands 10 paces away, neck craned, eye bright. Hyenas pace in the brush, tracing the boundary of your courage. The cat is gone with its main prize. You're left with what it didn't bother to keep. That is enough. Today, enough is a miracle. You work fast, trade places, share glances that mean more than any sound. There is no language that can tell this story yet. Only hands and eyes and tiny calls that say here now, careful. When one of you startles at a snap in the brush, the whole group flows into motion without thinking. A school of fish made of fur and bone and hope, then settles again when nothing follows. You return to the task until the ground tells you there is nothing left worth the risk. You move away from the water along a line the elders favour, with wind in your faces so your scent runs behind you. The sun lifts and thins the air. The grasses light up in a million blades. You halt at a scatter of stone where the bedrock rises like ribs. More work, different work. The stone here breaks with a conchoidal curve, a word you don't have but a shape your hands recognize. You set a core on your thigh, cradle it in a nest of calluses and strike just off the shoulder. A flake jumps. Another. You begin to see through the rock, ridges, platforms, shadows where the next blow wants to land. When a piece shears wrong and bites your knuckle, you hiss, then laugh softly through your nose as if the stone made a joke at your expense. This is not random violence. It's rhythm, angle, force, follow-through. You're not stronger than stone, but you are more patient. The child mimics you with a pebble too round to give anything up. You take it, place a flatter piece in their palm, and press your index finger against their wrist to slow the strike. Ah, you say, a pocket syllable that means look at this, try it this way. Their flake is ugly, thick, but it has an edge. They beam and immediately cut nothing in particular, just the air, savouring the sound of their own competence. Later, they will cut roots with that same edge and think they invented the idea. You will let them think so. That is how knowledge moves through time when the only library is a body. Heat climbs. You chew leaves that numb the tongue and carry on. The band spreads slightly, a loose necklace of bodies under scattered trees. You pause to dig at a tuber, wedge flakes as wedges, lever the clay, and rinse the starchy prize in a trickle of water. A cousin taps bark in search of grubs and shares with a tilt of the chin. Your shoulders steady under the simple math of energy in, energy out. The morning turns to a ring of small tasks. Cutting, stripping, cracking, tasting, carrying. When danger passes close, a leopard's shadow stretching ahead like a spear, you bunch into a knot against a trunk, eyes high, bodies tall, pretending to be larger than you are. The leopard prefers easy victories. You don't offer one. By early afternoon, the light bleaches colour from the world. You settle in the dapple for a while, back against bark polished by generations of resting backs. The skin on your shoulders smells of sun and crushed grass. Your hands ache in a satisfying way. You rub thumb to thumb and feel the tiny glassy splinters of stone that have worked into the skin. They will sting later. You will pick them out that night with a thorn. A companion sits close enough that your upper arms touch. They pass you a scrap of hide to chew, still salted with the animal's own life. You pass back a flake with an edge you're proud of. Their nod is an entire language. Good. Movement continues as shadows lengthen. You mark a tree with a notch where the branches fork into sleeping places, a sign tomorrow you will read without words. You skirt a patch of ground where the dust holds fresh prints too big and too many to ignore, a herd that will be worth shadowing at first light. You pause at a cliff where swifts pour from cracks like thrown seeds, and watch them draw patterns you can't name in the sky. The world is loud with meanings you don't have sounds for. You carry them anyway, in the tilt of your head, the line of your spine, the way you put each foot down. In the late light you return to the place of stone. You select a thicker core and try something you saw the elder do. Prepare a platform, strike in from the edge, and peel a longer blade. It takes 3 failures, a muttered growl, and then, there it is. A flake as long as your hand, thin and even, edges bright as water at noon. You test it on a vine and it parts with a whisper. You peel bark, you open a seed pod, you shave slivers of wood for later. The tool teaches you what it wants to do. Smell changes before light does. Evening brings damp, the green weight of it. Insects switch their instruments. Far off, hyenas begin a conversation that sounds like laughter, but isn't funny. You climb for the night. Hands to trunk. Feet to knots polished by ancestors you'll never know. In the crook where branch meets branch, you arrange yourself the way bodies learn to do long before this day. The youngest is passed from lap to lap and slumps against a chest, mouth open, palms starfish wide. You share the last string of meat, tough but generous. A breeze threads your hair. Below, the ground becomes a rumour. You do not sleep all at once. Sleep comes in thin layers, peeled back at every rustle. Each time you wake, you catalogue the dark, where the wind moves the grass, where it doesn't, where the river speaks, where it falls silent, the specific rhythm of hoof, the separate rhythm of paw. You're not safe. You're safer than you were. Your left hand curls around the long flake you kept, its edge turned away from skin, its presence a small oath. The child beside you breathes in 2-note patterns. Your ribs answer with their own slow music. In your mouth is the memory of fat, and behind your eyes the bright geometry of stone. Tomorrow the water will glitter again, and the grass will hide what it always hides, and your hands will remember the angles without being told, and the line from hunger to edge to marrow to thought will run through you like a path you can keep walking. Morning comes, thinner, drier. The grass is pale with seed and the wind carrying dust. Your stride has changed across the generations, hips narrow, legs long, feet sprung for distance. You move with a rhythm that spends less energy than it saves, the easy pendulum of someone meant to go on. The old trees are farther apart now. The forest has drawn back from the open ground. You trace the lines of rivers and the seams between hills and plain, reading shade and water like a book you don't know you know. In your hand is a different stone than before, bigger, heavier, worked on both faces until it holds a clean, continuous edge. A hand axe. It isn't an accident. It is a thought made durable. You kneel by a block of flint the size of a head and test it with a tap. The sound is right, somewhere between bell and bone. You choose a hammer stone with the weight your wrist likes, knock off a few thick flakes to open the core, and then begin the dance that you watch the elder's elder do. First, you set platforms, little ledges for later blows. Then, with the patience of water, you run the edge around one side and then the other, crossing the face in long, thinning arcs that leave ripples like frozen waves. When the mass is right, you switch to a softer hammer, antler or dense wood, to coax delicate bits away instead of breaking them. Symmetry emerges, not perfect but intentional, a teardrop with purpose, bevel straight enough to sight along. The tool fits your palm, heel to thumb, balance forward so the weight wants to cut. You touch the edge to your nail and it skates without catching. Good. This will pry roots, butcher meat, split wood, scrape hides, dig for water, carry its own reasons for being. You do not make a new one for every task, you carry this one. That means thinking ahead. Where stone lies under the skin of the land, how far until the next outcrop, how to resharpen on the way without wasting the body of the tool. You keep blanks tucked near camp, half-shaped cores cached under rock lips you can find again by scent and memory. You bring raw nodules back when your arms can bear it, and when they can't, you map a path that passes the same place later. The tool and the route inform each other. You're learning to plan days you haven't met yet. Heat swells as the sun leans higher, and the herd you've been shadowing drift toward low ground. You don't chase, you conserve. The others fan out, a few ahead to watch, a few behind to gather what the grass reveals. Eggs in a shallow scrape, a fallen chick, a cluster of savoury bulbs. Your skin is slick, shining and open to air. Sweat beads and vanishes. Breath comes steady. The big animals in the herd, wrapped in fur and duty, do not lose heat the way you do. So you follow through the time of day when the world wobbles with mirage and the ground is a kiln, not too near, not so far that you lose the trail. Hours become a substance you can hold. You wear them down. Distance is your only weapon that works at the speed of patience. By late afternoon, an antelope falters and peels away from the moving brown river of bodies. Not young, not old, simply unlucky. You do not rush at it like a storm. There is no last sprint and sudden ending. You keep it moving when it wants to stop, steering with pressure, with noise, with angles the land gives you. Each time it rests, you do not. Each time it pants, you chant air through your mouth like a small stream over stones. When it stumbles into a shallow depression rimmed with thorn, It makes one mistake too many. You close and commit. The hand axe is not a spear. It is not elegant from a distance, but up close it is authority. You grip at the thick and strike where muscle meets bone, where the life is, fast, again, until stillness takes over. Not triumph, relief. Hunger inside you flickers low like a lamp trimmed for the night. The sharing is not a ceremony, but it has rules that feel older than the ground. The strong open, the patient portion, the young wait and do not wait. Learning what waiting means by how far hunger can stretch without breaking. You pry joints, you peel hide, you fill your mouth with heat-softened fat that coats your tongue and imagination. The hand axe earns its keep in a red circle of task and breath. Someone lays long bones aside for later. Someone else frees the tendon that will harden a spear point over a slow flame. At the edge of the circle, an older body sits with their back to a log and sharpens small flakes into scrapers with tiny exact taps. Their gaze distant in the way of people who carry many rooms in their heads and visit them often. The sun leans and changes colour. Flies change their song. The day begins to fold. Smoke arrives before fire does. Off in the hills, lightning found a tree the air had already half burned, and the dry season did the rest. You smelled it earlier, and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Now the talk is in motion. A small group peels away with long branches and cautious hearts. They don't rush into flame. They circle the edge where grass is black and the heat is a lesson. When they find a log that smoulders at one end, they test with their palms, find the side the wind has forgotten, and press a bundle of dry grass and seed heads against the ember with a tenderness you rarely show anything. A breath, a flicker, a small sustained glow, life pulled from a dangerous mouth. You cradle it in bark and carry it like an infant you cannot afford to drop. By night, there is a circle of stones around a patch of dirt rubbed raw, and the small ember has become a thing with opinions. It wants fuel, but not any fuel. It likes bark sliced thin and wood stage from twig to finger, to wrist, to forearm, to thigh. It complains in smoke when you rush it and praises you in quiet flames when you take your time. It asks you to think like it thinks, in gradients, in sequences, and then rewards you with a kind of warmth that has nothing to do with heat. The circle gathers, the dark steps back. Predators blink from the perimeter and decide to hunt elsewhere because no good comes from arguing with light. You learn the rest by being there. The smoke keeps the biting insects behind their invisible line. Your hands stop flinching at phantom legs. Dry meat tastes different above coals, sweeter on the tongue, kinder to the gut. Roots soften until teeth are not a gate but a courtesy. You notice the way the oldest among you stays nearest the coals and sleeps deeper. You notice the child who laughed wetly all day, coughing less as the night goes on. Fire stretches the day's usable hours, creates a corridor of time in which tasks that were once impossible find room. You flake tiny retouch with eyes that can keep seeing. You dig splinters from your palm without missing the thorn. You tell the kind of almost stories that are not yet memory, but more than noise. Faces look different in firelight. More open, more animal, more human. The same face can be all three. Sleep does not take you the way it used to. It arrives in turns, in watches. 2 wake, 2 doze. 1 tends the coals with a stick knocked from a thick branch, and shaved to comfort in the hand. You do not yet make flame from wood and will not for a long, long time, but you can keep it, feed it, lull it to embers and call it back with breath and a twist of grass. In the morning, you will carry live coals in a nest of fungus and shredded bark, inside a hollowed length of root, across hours of walking without letting them die. You will become keepers of a creature that eats what you do not, and offers what you cannot make alone. Days layer into seasons. The open country rolls away under your feet, then breaks at the edge of water that runs not to a pool, but to distance, broad, slow, reflective as a sleeping eye. You follow it because it follows gravity, and because there are always animals and shade and stone and new kinds of food along its banks. The river grows up into a valley, narrows into a throat between cliffs, spills out into a fan of islands braided in reeds. The ground changes colour, then texture, then habit. The sky throws new shapes. You step from your familiar map into pages no one you've met has read. It does not feel like leaving. It feels like walking and not stopping. You meet other bands at the bend of an unknown river where the bank shelves gently and the mud has recent tracks cut into it like writing. They look like you and not like you. Cheeks a fraction broader, hair a little tighter, scars in patterns that mean things. They carry hand axes too, some of them so thin and symmetrical your chest tightens with appreciation. Faces of stone worked, until light seems to pool along their edges. You trade without knowing that word exists. A pile of nodules with a better grain for the journey upriver. A haft trick that makes a heavy tool easier to grip for a long day of scraping. A path sketched in ash and finger that shows a way around a swamp that will swallow a careless calf. The children stare at each other like animals ignoring mirrored glass. An old man laughs at your fire nest and shows a different kind of tinder that lights faster when air is wet. You copy without shame. They copy back. Sometimes the river runs out of land and thins into the widening mouth where birds loud as arguments ride the wind. The far shore is not far, yet water does not make a bridge. You wait for a time when the tide backs away from its own edges and the sand lies out in flat shining steps. You wade where it invites and turn back where it refuses. Now and then the world cheats and makes a way in other forms, storm-fallen mats of brush thick enough to bear weight, tangles of roots that hold air between branches and ride the current like boats that forgot they were trees. You climb onto what floats and push off with poles and intention, hearts loud in your heads. Most times you return wet and laughing, with nothing at all changed except your hunger. Once you arrive on a shore you could only squint at before, startled at your own audacity, and find tracks in the sand that belong to no one you know. The animals change their faces as you change your ground. In the far grasslands there are forms that look like horses but aren't, horns that twist like vines, and cats with light spattered across their coats. Where trees thicken again and lift their crowns into fog, there are apes that are not cousins but neighbours, long-limbed, sky-handed, full of questions you will never learn to ask. Heat gives way to cool and back again. Rain turns from knives to nets. You learn the taste of plants that your grandmother never named. You watch birds that nest on cliffs learn to live on the roofs of caves. You name nothing but remember everything that matters. At night, under stars in arrangements you haven't seen before, the fire's grammar stays the same. Lay wood thin to thick, leave a mouth open for breath, feed a little before sleep and a little after, dry the meat that won't keep, smoke the hides so insects change their minds. Tell what happened in the day in a way that holds more than the day. Your hands keep working after your legs stop. A young one leans into your shoulder and asks with their eyes to see the edge trick again, the one that makes a long slice of stone with a proud spine and hungry sides. You show them the angle with your wrist, then let them ruin 2 cores until the third begins to listen. When they make something that almost works, they hold it up, and the whole circle hums in a way only humans do when someone has coaxed a thought into the world and made it bite. The body you carry is not your ancestor's body, not exactly. The bowl of your pelvis is narrower, the sail of your nose is higher, your shoulders sit a little different on your ribs, your teeth meet in ways that favour softer food, and your gut does not beg for the huge volume of leaves it once demanded. At some meals you hardly chew at all because the fire has done that labour for you. Your eyes see a little later into the evening now that fire lets the evening exist. Your feet have stories in them for places no one would believe if belief were a thing anyone kept in words. You're still an animal, and you're becoming something no animal has ever been quite this way. A maker who carries the making in mind before it exists in the hand. The wind shifts and carries with it the dry cold of lands you haven't walked. It smells like stone, like open floor, like work. The embers wake with a quiet red breath when you nudge them, and the circle leans in as sparks stair-step up into the dark. Tomorrow you will move again, not because here is bad, but because there is forward, and your legs are instruments tuned for it, and your tools fit best in motion, and the map you keep drawing with your feet is a story that keeps telling itself, while the flames talk in their own steady language, and the night arranges its lights into patterns your children will learn by heart without ever giving them names. Wind moves down the valley like a living thing, colder than you expect even at noon, combing frost from the grass and laying it back in silver. The river runs low and fast between shelves of limestone, its voice thin, its edges glazed in ice where shadows linger. You keep close to the bank because the water writes everything you need to know. Where animals cross, where reeds hide birds, where the mud holds tracks the size of your hand or the width of your chest. Your body is shorter and wider than your ancestors of the open plains, wrapped in layered hide that smells faintly of smoke. Your chest is deep. Your breath fills it quickly and warms the cold air before it has a chance to bite. Your hands are square and sure. In one of them you cradle a prepared core, a fist of flint with a planned future. You sit on a flat stone the river has polished and begin the work you learned by watching 100 times. Shape the core before you take from it. A few hard blows to open a surface, then turn, then strike to make a platform just so. The next strikes do not guess. They follow a path you made with your last 3 movements. The flake that jumps is exactly the flake you meant to free. Broad, thin, its underside smooth with ripples that tell the story of the blow. You put it aside for a moment and take a bit of sticky black from a pouch, the resin you cooked from bark in a pit with a cap of stone and a fire above it. The smoke that day smelled like earth and winter. Now the tar warms easily between your fingers. You press the flake against a seasoned shaft, add sinew twisted wet, smear more resin, and bind hide over all so the glue hides inside like a secret. Hafting is a promise. The stone will not work alone. Around you, the others make different shapes from the same stone. One thins a scraper into a crescent that fits under the thumb for the long hours of hide. One frees a point with a proud spine for a heavy thrusting spear that will not be thrown but driven forward with the weight of a body. The old woman who taught you to prepare cores does not strike today. She watches, correcting with a soft sound, a click of tongue against teeth that means change your angle, not your idea. The child beside her is tasked with collecting the thin chips blown off by small retouch. They will scrape plants, polish wood, do a dozen hidden jobs. Nothing is waste in a place where winter makes you count your thoughts. The hunt begins before you rise. It begins in the way you arrange your feet when you stand, the way you read the hill for currents of air. It is not a chase. It is a narrowing. Distance turned to pressure. Pressure turned to a mistake. You choose the notch between slopes where the snow lies deeper and feet sink through the crust. There, a herd has passed and trampled the surface into a rutted lane. There, a young bison stumbles and recovers and stumbles again. Your spear is ash-hardened at the point over fire, the haft bound so well the wood seems to grow around the stone. You and 2 others move as one animal with 3 hearts. You show yourselves and then vanish. Steer with sound and silence. Offer the easy way forward until the easy way becomes the only way, until the herd flows past and the one you chose is left in a slow pool of air. Your breath freezes on your beard. Your fingers burn with returning blood. When the time is exactly the time, you go in. The first spear lands and stands heavy with purpose, and it is close, very close, and loud, and then it is still. The work afterward is the work that keeps you alive when the wind has teeth. The hide comes off in a plan of cuts you know by heart. Ribs open like a book. Fat is gathered into the broad bowl of a shoulder blade and carried to where the fire will be. Long bones are set aside for later, and the head will make a pot when the cheeks and tongue have had their turn. A young man with a limp, healed long ago and healed badly, sits with the old woman and works a pile of leg tendons into long threads. The scar on his thigh is deep and pale, a rope under the skin from a season when he could not hunt, and the band kept him warm and fed anyway. He moves carefully, unbothered. There's a place in the work for every body that has learned the winter's language. Back at the shelter, the cave takes you into its throat. The entrance faces away from the prevailing wind. A low wall of stone and stacked wood breaks the drafts that sneak in from the edges. The hearth is where it always is, under the place in the ceiling where soot blackens the stone and the smoke remembers to leave. Someone feeds tinder into last night's careful ember. The spark is a fire seed cupped in punky fungus and shredded bark. It is coaxed with a breath that begins in the belly and ends in a glow that licks dry reed and flakes into a tongue. Fire answers and begins to speak in its many consonants: crackle, hiss, sigh. You add thicker wood uphill of the flame and watch the heat move like an animal hunting shelter. You render fat in a skin bag propped with sticks. It clears and gathers into a pale gold that will be stiff in the morning. Meat strips hang on racks, smoke's fingers darkening them, driving off the wet that invites rot. A woman with a scar like lightning on her jaw softens skins with a scraper, the rhythm steady. Push, lift, breathe, push, until the hide is no longer a stiff wall but a curtain that learns the folds of your shoulders. There are no needles with eyes. There are awls and holes and sinew pulled through with a twist, seams rubbed with fat so they refuse the wind. Children carry wood, then sit cross-legged and copy the motions with scraps, their tongues between their teeth, their pride quiet and hot. When the snow comes hard, the cave becomes a town the length of a campfire's light, tasks sought by skill and strength and age. Someone makes black lines on a spear shaft with a mineral that leaves colour on everything it loves. Someone else grinds a red stone into powder with a hand-sized slab and a round river pebble, then mixes it with animal fat to make a paste that shines on skin and stays there where sweat might take other colours away. A girl threads eagle talons she found last warm season, rubbing them with fat so they gleam like wet stone. She will wear them when the band gathers to dance and stamp at the edge of the light, when feet make the old rhythms into maps on the floor. The old man listens to the storm and hums back to it, a low drone that seems to steady the roof. You follow his voice with your own until the two sounds become one. Sometimes the winter sends visitors. The first sign is always a scent you don't own, then a shadow at the mouth, a pause, and figures that move like you and not like you in equal measure. Taller, narrower, clothes sewn tight to limbs, faces different around the eyes. Their hands are open and empty, their spears stacked against a rock with points where you can see them. Caution is older than any meeting. You keep it. But beneath caution lives the part of you that is always hungry for new ways to do what you already know. Fire needs more wood for a larger circle. The gesture for sit points to the floor beside the hearth. You make it. They do not speak your sounds, not exactly, but the bones of the words feel familiar in the throat. A pouch changes hands, and the smell of the sea opens in the room, salt and shell and weed. Inside are small, perfect discs with holes drilled through, worn glossy where string has polished them. Shells from a place the river dreams of. You offer in return a handful of flint blades from the good ridge upriver, thin, long, keen, and a lump of black resin wrapped in bark. One of them touches it to the fire and nods at the way it softens without melting, at the way it grabs the stick when it cools. Their eyes brighten. Yours do too. A woman from their group coughs deep in her chest, the sound that keeps sleep from taking anyone. Your healer, who gathers leaves and roots when the ground is soft and keeps them dry when it isn't, warms water in a skin and steeps bitter twigs. The stranger drinks it with a face that says the taste is a fight, but the warmth is a friend. She sleeps later and does not cough so hard. You imagine the inside of her chest smoothing like bark under a scraper. There are rules for sharing space in a storm, and you find them even if you didn't know them before. They keep to their side of the hearth. You keep to yours. The circle is one. Someone tells a story and someone else, who does not know the words, tells it again with hands instead, and the room laughs in the same places. Children test each other like pups, take a shell, give a small scraper, tuck treasures into fur. A man from the other band shows a different way of binding a point so that when the wood swells in wet weather, the lash does not loosen. You show him the small stroke you like for sharpening without changing the angle. There is a brief moment at the hearth when hips shift. Eyes answer other eyes, and something older and simpler than trade passes between two bodies with curiosity in their bones. Two bands leave more connected than they arrived. Their paths partly plaited now, their futures less separate than they were. The days between storms are hard and bright. You cut blocks of snow and stack them to block the long wind that combs the valley clean. You set deadfall traps where stoats run their narrow roads. You follow ptarmigan to find where they churn the drifts under dwarf willow. Someone with hands that love wood shapes a branch into a simple hook to pull glowing coals without burning skin. Someone else carves a groove along a shaft and rubs fat into it, then dusts it with powder from the black stone so the spear slides past the hand with less complaint. Small changes add up to less ache, more time, fewer mistakes the cold would punish without mercy. Burials come even when you are careful. The old woman whose voice corrected your wrists one morning does not wake the next. She's carried with gentleness to a pocket in the cave, where the floor is soft and the ceiling low. The ground resists at first, frozen, hard, ungrateful, but it softens under heated stones and patience. Her body is arranged the way she liked to sleep, curled as if she might straighten in the middle of a dream. Red earth dust touches her brow and her hands. A tool she made well is folded under her palm. A strip of hide with a familiar smell lies across her chest. No one speaks for a long time. When the earth covers her, palms press flat to it and rest there until arms tremble with the weight of holding on. Later, the young try to copy the soft click she made when your angle was wrong and fail and try again. Teaching outlives the teacher. Not all meetings with strangers end with shared hearths. Sometimes tracks cross and do not pause. Sometimes a herd is funneled toward the same notch by two hungry bands at once, and there is a shape in the air that is not wind. Then spear shafts are held a little louder, and bodies make themselves big, and voices turn to sharp edges, and everyone remembers that winter is a judge who does not explain her decisions. Often, the moment passes because the work of staying alive is heavy, and a fight would tip the load to ground. Sometimes it doesn't. Scars recall those days in raised lines across shoulders and thighs. On a bright afternoon that feels like a promise, you sit at the cave mouth and grind mineral into colour. Snow-reflected light makes you blink. The world is all white and blue and the black lines of trees. You grind anyway, patient, turning stone to dust and dust to paste, mixing it with melted fat until it gleams. The paste clings to skin. It marks the shaft of a spear with bands that tell a story the way cut notches do. Who made it? For what? When the weather turned. The wall beside you is pale, pocked, full of curves. Your palm hovers over it, feeling the way the rock wants to guide the hand along edges you did not expect. The fire pops behind you. A child laughs at something too small to see. Far down the valley, a dark thread of figures moves into view, not near, not far, coming along the river with the slow certainty of people who know where they're going and carry with them shells that smell of salt and songs you have not heard yet. You rub the paste between thumb and forefinger and look from your hand to the stone and back to your hand, and the thought you've been circling settles closer, warm as breath in winter, steady as the ember you keep alive through the night. The lamp is a shallow bowl of stone cupped in your hand, filled with melted fat that smells faintly of smoke and animal, a sliver of twisted plant fibre drinking fire along its edge. Its light is not loud. It breathes. You hold it away from your body and step deeper into the cave, where the air cools the back of your teeth and your breath turns to a cloud that glows and then vanishes. Walls close in and then open like throats. The ceiling lifts so high the flame cannot find it. Under your bare feet, the floor is chalk slick and rippled with tracks from others who came before you carrying the same kind of small suns. The world outside the entrance drops away to a rumour of wind. In here, time sounds like dripping. You stop where the rock face leans in, a pale skin waiting for touch. From a pouch you take a lump of red earth, crushed fine between stone and stone, mixed with fat to make it cling. Some of it you smear with your thumb along a fissure that already looks like the curve of a bison's shoulder, letting the rock tell you which way the animal faces. The rest you keep as powder. You press your palm flat to the wall, fingers spread, thumb crooked, feel stones cold climb into your skin. You purse your lips and blow. Pigment lifts, rides your breath, settles around the flesh it cannot touch. When you pull your hand away, a negative hangs there, as if the wall remembered you and will not let go. It is not the first on this wall. Hands gather like a small crowd, some as narrow as a child's, some broad and scar-lined, some missing a finger that never grew or was lost. You place yours among them without thinking and step back, and the shape hums in your chest like a low chord. I was here. Other colours wait in other bags. Charcoal for black, not just from burned wood, but from the soft stone that never lived and still makes soot when it meets fire. Ochres yellow and brown, something dark from the hills that leaves the deep black you save for outlines and eyes. You wet the powders on your tongue and feel their grit and bitterness. Make paste on a flat pebble for your brush made of chewed twig, or chew hollow a bird bone and blow again through it. This time over the long lines you cut into a mask of bark to narrow the spray. The cave changes under your hand. A horse's barrel swells from the bulge in the rock. A line of deer runs along the curve of a recess you must lean to see. A Yarrox turns its great head and tosses horn points you suggest with 3 hard strokes. Where a wall rises beyond easy reach, you wedge poles into cracks and make a scaffold of saplings and rawhide, climbing high into dark air that smells of bat and stone and old fire. Up there, your lamp throws the shadows of your own hands long across bodies that do not exist until you finish them. When you paint legs 2 and 3 and 4 in a staggered spray, when the lamp flickers the way the lamps always do, the animal moves. Not a trick, a memory of running captured in 4 positions at once, released by light. You do not come here to live. You come here to make the place where stories hang. Far back, where a tight passage turns to a room, the floor is smoothed by knees. Grease shines on the rock where bodies leaned and listened. Someone beats a folded hide with a stick until the cave answers back with its own heartbeat. A flute carved from the hollow bone of a large bird sings a line that moves through stone like water along a small channel. Holes drilled carefully with a flake make notes that climb and fall in a way that pulls your face into a smile you can feel without seeing. A second flute answers, not the same, not different, running close alongside. Rattles whisper in time, seeds and gourds, hooves strung like rain. Voices begin to braid. Low humming swells until it holds the lamp's flame in it, then rises and threads itself between the paintings so the animal bodies seem to exhale. The child who fell asleep by the entrance wakes at the turn of a phrase and sits up with pupils round and dark, the kind of awake that is bigger than not sleeping. Beads scatter like quiet stars across a skin near the fire at camp, far from the cave, where daywork waits and smoke lifts straight in cold air. You string them not just because beauty makes breath feel different in the chest, though it does, but because beads carry messages, shell from a coastline too far for your feet. This season glows faintly pink. Amber has the warmth of honey when the light moves through it. Pierced teeth speak of hunts worth telling twice. A pattern around your neck is an announcement you don't need words for. Who you walk with, who taught you, where you've been. The beads click softly as you lean over a hide to sew. The needle is bone, slender, with an eye bored through and polished smooth. The sinew thread sings a tiny note as it pulls tight. You cut panels with a flint blade so thin the edge shines like wet glass. Sew them into a sleeve that takes the shape of the arm that will live inside it. Add a fringe that is not strictly necessary but makes the wearer smile. Clothes now are more than warmth. They are maps of skill. On the steppe far to the east, winter leans its whole weight on the ground until every sound becomes a hard thing. There, you build a round house from the bones of giants who walk the world as if snow were just a shallow river. Skulls stack like heavy bowls. Tusks arch into doorways. Ribs splay like a fan caught mid-breeze. Hides stretch over the frame to make a skin against the sky. Inside, a low fire turns the air amber. Fat lamps burn in niches carved from bone and stone. Smoke finds the hole you left in the roof and leaves slow enough to cure meat hung on lines above your head. Children trace spirals on tusks with their fingers, while you carve deeper lines with a burin and rub in pigment to make them shout from the pale curve. A small shelf holds a figure your hands coaxed from mammoth ivory. A woman with strong legs and a belly full of meanings, polished so smooth she looks wet. You set her down gently beside a string of beads and a carved bird no bigger than your thumb. These things are not tools for cutting or scraping. They are tools for remembering what bodies can do, what the world might hold beyond hunger and sleep, what hands can pull into being from stubborn material. Food still matters in long ways and short ones. The atlatl, your spear thrower, is a lever of wood or bone with a notch that bites gently into the butt of a dart. You lay a long, balanced shaft along it, bring arm and shoulder and waist into a single line, and the throw becomes a gift you give the dart. More distance, more speed, more time in the air than muscles alone would allow. The first time you see the point bury deep where it should, farther than your father's best throw could reach without help, a laugh climbs out of you like a small animal that refuses to hide. Later, when someone from another river shows a short, flexing bow and a slim shaft tipped with a microblade set in resin along a groove, you watch the arrow fly and feel the prickle along your forearms that means the world just widened again. Time, too, becomes something you hold and mark. On a smooth piece of antler you cut a line for each night the moon swelled and shrank, then realize, on the second turning, that the pattern repeats with a rhythm you can feel in your own blood. A stick near the hearth grows a ladder of notches that mean something only to you and the one who sat with you long nights as you carved them. You scratch the line of a river into ivory and mark where the salmon choke it so thick in warm moons even children could catch them with baskets and laughter. You draw hills from memory, 2 humps, a notch, a long back, and someone else nods, pointing in the air in a way that says, "I know that place, and this is where we sleep there when wind comes from the north." Burials happen in the places that hold warmth and smell like fire. You do not take the dead far, you bring them close. You choose a hollow under a wall, or a quiet shelf where lamps throw steady light, and you make a bed of soft things. Down, dry grass, skins, old hair saved in a pouch by someone who loved to brush it. Pigment touches bone and brow. Beads and tools and a figure that lived in their hands go with them. You close their eyes even if they already closed themselves. The child presses the flat of a palm to a cold cheek, and waits without understanding for it to warm, and when it doesn't, an elder covers the hand with theirs, and 2 sets of fingers learn together that letting go is also a kind of keeping. After, the singers sing low, not because the dead need songs, but because the living do. In the morning your breath fogs the air, and life starts again as if it had never stopped. Outside the painted caves the world wakes brighter each spring. Grass shoots come thin and sweet. Rivers burst their banks and then draw lace along their edges. Birds pull threads across the sky until the dawn is full of weaving. Camps are not all the same anymore. Some return to favoured places with a loyalty that is almost a promise, where flint comes out of the ground like loaves that only need slicing, where horse herds funnel through a gap every year you've been alive, where a stand of trees drops nuts so plentiful even squirrels forget to argue. There are paths between these places, and along them travel not just bodies but ways of doing. A sharper way to make pitch from bark with a covered pit and careful fire, a new knot that lets a sling stone sit tight until the moment it should fly, a story about a cave with animals that climb out of the wall if you look long enough and listen the right way. At night in camp, when work is finished enough to let your shoulders drop, someone begins the naming of the fires. This one is for cooking, broad and low, that one for heat, with logs laid to last until dawn. A small one off to the side just for light and tasks that want steady hands. Lamps line a windbreak like a constellation you can touch. A woman shapes a small mask of clay with holes for eyes and leaves it near the edge until it hardens. A boy whittles a little stag and fits its legs to rock so it stands in a pose that makes your own knees want to bend. Two men stitch a story into hide with black lines. Curves that say river, dots that say fish, zigzags that have meant storm since before anyone remembers not knowing what a storm is. The air smells of fat and smoke and crushed plant and sweat, and the cool, mineral breath of night. The ground under the sleeping skins is soft with needles and old leaves. The last thing you hear before sleep comes looking is someone counting with their fingers, quietly, as if testing how many nights remain until the moon will be full again. On a day when the river runs brown with melt and the first mosquitoes discover you again, you stand at the mouth of a different cave and feel the wind come up from the earth. This one is a labyrinth. You will go in with 3 lamps and come out with 2 still burning, and on some wall in the middle of that long throat, you will find a spray of dots that matches the pattern you learned to see in the sky in a late summer, and you will laugh because the cave and the heavens have been talking without you. You will press your hand where other hands once pressed, and feel the small suction of fat and ash and stone, the kiss of it. You will not know why you cry, only that salt and iron taste the same whether they come from food or eyes, and both mean you are alive. Far off, on a plain that rises toward a line of hills where the light gathers in the evenings, people you do not yet know bend over patches of earth, where nothing wild grows the way it grew before, and their fingers learn a new rhythm that will change the shape of hunger. But for now the drums talk to the caves, and the caves talk back, and the wolves skirting the camp pause to listen, and then move on, and the lamp in your hand writes a line of light along the wall that feels like it could go on as long as breath does, as long as stone does, as long as the stories do, while the night outside holds steady and waits for your footsteps to carry you back to the fire. Dawn comes with a hush you can taste. Cool air pooled in the low places, a damp that weighs the grass, birds working the light with quick syllables. You kneel and press your fingers into a furrow you scratched yesterday with a deer shoulder blade, the soil dark and soft as the inside of your cheek. From a woven pouch you pinch out seeds, wheat that once grew wild on hills that wrinkle the horizon, barley that used to shatter at a touch and scatter itself to wind and birds. You learned which heads hold tight and which fall. Now year by year your hands choose the tight ones and the field remembers. The seeds hit earth with the sound of tiny footsteps. You cover them with the flat of your palm and feel the cool fold back into place. You do not pray, you plan. Rain in 2 weeks, weeding in 4, cutting when the awns turn from green to straw, and the field sounds like quiet fire. Behind you, a low wall of sun-baked mud brick keeps the night animals from what you plant. Farther still, a ring of stone encircles the place where homes press together shoulder to shoulder. The wall's shadow is cool already even as the sun climbs. It holds back the sudden river when winter melts too quickly, and it says with its weight, "Inside is us." A tower rests against it, steps spiralling up inside stone, a place to watch the flood, to see who comes along the wadi, to feel wind on a hot morning and count the fields with your eyes. The village wakes by layers. A child begins to turn a quern, round stone over flat, and the song of grit on grit fills the lanes like a slow drum. Flour dust floats in light that slants through a reed mat. Someone slaps a flat of dough against the clay wall of an oven. It blisters and lifts, scenting the air with a sweetness that has nothing to do with fruit. Goats complain from their pen and then fall to chewing. Busy mouths, soft eyes, hooves ticking against packed earth. A woman fingers a lamb's ear and feels the fine heat there. The quick river under skin that belongs to you now, because your hands shape who the animals become. Sheep bellies swell with wool that will be string and cloth by autumn. In a courtyard, a man reaches for a spindle whorl, sets it spinning with a snap, and the fluff in his fingers drafts down into a twist, so sure it hardly seems to move. A line grows between hand and whorl, L-like and singing. You step out across roofs because there are no streets between these rooms. The doors are in the sky. Ladders lean against thresholds in the ceiling. You climb and emerge into light, then cross to another ladder and drop inside another house where a woman binds a loom to pegs set in the floor, weights of baked clay keeping warp threads straight like rain. The room smells of lime plaster, of smoke, of crushed sage. Bull's horns, heavy, reused, ceremonial, sprout from a wall in a neat row. On another wall, red ochre lines show long cats with spotted flanks, people with upraised arms, the memory of a hunt that tastes like metal and song. Under one platform bed, the floor tells a secret. Years ago, you made a hole and placed a body there, curled as if asleep, a relative whose laugh you still hear when your hands work quickly, whom you dream when the moon pours its white onto the roof. Sometimes the skulls come back out for a time, the face remade with plaster and paint, eyes set with shell to look at you from the place between memory and matter. Then they return below, and the floor closes, and children nap above a quiet crowd of ancestors. The house is a family with many rooms, living, cooking, weaving, remembering. Trade walks the rooftops with you. In your palm is a piece of black glass sharper than ice, obsidian that grew in volcanoes far from this river valley. A man with a scar shaped like a fish on his forearm brought it, wrapped in a goat skin, and asked for baskets cured with smoke, for a jar of salt, for a bag of grain measured to a smooth stone's weight. On a shelf are clay tokens, little spheres and cones and discs incised with simple marks, one for a jar of barley, two for goats, a different shape for oil. When a neighbour leaves with a sealed clay ball that holds the tokens for what you owe, you press your mark into its wet skin, and the debt becomes a small moon that keeps its own light. Midday is a braid of work. You walk the field and pull up plants that don't belong, fingers stained green. You strip reeds at the marsh and lay them to dry for mats and boat skins. You patch a pot with a slip of clay, smoothing the seam with a wet thumb till the scar lies flat. Pottery is a miracle you can hold. Water waits where water would wander. Grain sleeps through months it would have spoiled. Stew becomes a memory you can repeat. An older woman with a laugh like clacked stones paddles a vessel into shape on a turntable that spins because her hand tells it to. She pinches a neat lip all the way around that will pour without betraying what it holds. A boy paints a line of simple birds around the shoulder and frowns when one flies crooked. Evening draws the village into its circle. People gather in the central court where the oven heat still breathes from the wall. There is a jar whose mouth froths faintly. A drink made from grain and quiet time, sour and sweet, with a soft courage in it. Bread comes out hot, split with a reed, and spread with cheese salted enough to remember summer in winter. Stories walk from mouth to mouth, stitched with hands, and the children learn the year by what is said. When the wind shifts and the fish run upriver, when the first green figs split, when dust blown from the east tastes like copper on the tongue. You make tools for this life the way you once made tools for the chase. Sickles now have teeth, a row of tiny blades set in wood with resin. They skim across stems with a hiss, filling your arms with the generous weight of harvest. Mortars bruise grain that refuses the quern. Pestles carry the rhythm into your shoulders. You cure flax stalks in a slow pool and break them into threads that do not mind water and take dye like a promise. You glaze a pot and fire it hot enough that water beads on its skin. You walk to the spring with a jar on your head, and the path under your feet is compacted with the souls of years, aligned to water in the shape of a sentence. Not everything in the new life is kinder. Bodies bend in ways that stay bent. Wrists ache. Teeth record the grit of stones in flour. Sickness learns to travel where people sleep close and share food and breath and touch. When fever works the rooms in order, the healer burns sweet herbs and smokes the doorways, presses warm hands to brow and belly, pours willow bark tea past lips that refuse it, and waits with a patience trained by slow work. You carry the dead out through the roof the way they came into the house, with a ladder and careful hands. The room below feels larger and smaller at once. The next morning the quern's voice begins again, because hunger does not stop for grief and neither does love. Your feet learn more roads. You follow the river down to where salt lies like frost when the water leaves. You trade jars for slabs you can break with a stone and crumble into stew. You walk toward mountains and bring back a dull green rock that looks like old leaf but melts when the fire is very hot and the air is made to rush. First you hammer metal found native, cold copper beaten into beads and awls that shine in sun and turn skin green where they rest. Later, much later, you sit beside a small furnace shaped from clay and stone. Inside, a charcoal fire burns with the voice of a bellows you pump with a goat skin and two steady hands. Charcoal eats air and answers with heat that staggers. The dull green rocks sweat, then slump. A bright bead forms where ash piles up. When you draw it out with a stick, it smears like wax and hardens in the hungry air. The village gathers at a distance, respectful of burns and luck. The bead cools to a colour like autumn light. It is softer than you thought, and you can bend it with a stone and a wish. You can hammer it hard, and it forgives you by holding the shape you taught it. You string the first copper bead next to shell and amber and tooth, and everyone's eyes go to it as if the sun had fallen to your throat for a moment and decided to stay. Seasons settle into a wheel you can push and be pushed by. In spring you scratch earth and trust. In summer you weed and watch the sky for the thin lines of locusts and for the thick lines of storm. In autumn you cut and carry and lay grain into jars, lids sealed with mud and straw, a whole winter sleeping behind clay. In winter you mend and make and visit, telling what you did when days were long and making promises to the days when they will be again. Some nights you walk beyond the wall to a low hill with a ring of stones that remember the sunrise on a day when the shadow of one touches the face of another. You stand where your mother stood, and her mother, in the cold blue before dawn, and feel the horizon gather itself. The sun climbs exactly where the stone said it would, and someone laughs softly, relief more than joy. The year's door has opened in the right place. Work can begin again. The village is not the only village. Far away along other rivers, people scratch other soils, teach other seeds to stay, listen to goats and pigs and cattle until the animals' bodies agree to be remade. On the big island in the river to the west, someone builds with stones so large you need a crowd to imagine it. To the north, in long houses with bark roofs, people thresh grain by the wind and build fences that braid entire fields into family. Across seas you cannot yet cross, others notice taro roots fattening where they planted the tops, rice holding water where they flood the flat land, teosinte flowering into cobs under hands that learn which kernels to keep. The world begins to echo itself, planting, pens, pots, paths, patience. Night comes with a warmth that rises from plastered floors and ovens cooling from the day's last loaves. A clay tablet the size of a hand sits by the door with a few incised marks that match the tokens sealed inside a little clay pouch. The pouch bears your mark, and the tablet bears the mark of the man whose grain sleeps in your jars. The marks are small and careless looking, and they hold a promise that would be heavy if you tried to carry it without clay. A girl curls by the hearth and falls asleep counting with a string of knots. Beside her, A boy plays his reed pipe and misses the same note every time and laughs each time as if the note were a running animal that keeps getting away. Sparks climb and go out and climb and go out. On the roof, a mother spreads fresh-cut flax to drink the moon. In a shed, the dull green rocks wait in a basket, patient as seeds, while the goats shift and the bread cools, and the night breathes in and out through reed and door seam, and the copper bead at your throat remembers heat and holds its small sun against your skin. The fire is low now, a quiet heart in the dark. We've walked a long road together, first edges at the watering hole, hand axes and night flames, cousins in winter caves, songs painted on stone, and finally the hush of fields and the first bright drop of copper. All of it, step by patient step, becoming you. The tools have changed, but the hands are the same. The sky has new names, but the stars are exactly where your ancestors left them. So let your shoulders soften, jaw unclench, breath settle into its easy rhythm. You're safe. You carry their courage, their craft, their wonder. Every time you light a stove, tie a knot, tell a story, or simply look up. If this journey helped you rest, I'd love to have you here again. Tap like, subscribe for the next night's story, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. It's a small miracle to trace this map together, dot by sleepy dot. For now, let the last glow fade, and let the dark be kind. Sleep well, traveller. I'll meet you on the next path, under the same old stars.